Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals and the media may be audibly and/or visually recording this meeting. As well, a reminder, please, that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to today's agenda?
Yes, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Consent item 7.3, the MPAC responses to committee questions and concerns regarding maintenance of the voters list. The responses are from the September 9th, 2019 meeting. Item 8.3, Rob D'Amico and Stan Double from the Hamilton Professional Firefighters Association, respecting support for the firefighter memorial at Gage Park. This delegation has been withdrawn at this time. As well, the amendments to the outstanding business list, there were 2 to be determined. We now have dates. Under proposed new due dates for item Roman numeral 8, the establishing of a gender and equity lens on housing services. The due date is now June 17th, 2020. And pending litigation matters and associated liabilities, the new due date is January 15th, 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Pauls. Electronic vote, please. I've got my colors mixed up. All right, thank you. That carries. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a declaration of interest, but I just wish committee to know that at 2 o'clock I have a formal consultation meeting downstairs. I will leave and come back as soon as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Thank you. Hearing none. Approval of the minutes. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the minutes of October 30th and November 6th as presented? So moved, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Councillor Jackson and Councillor Partridge. All in favor or opposed? Thank you. That carries. Consent items. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve consent items 7.1 and 7.2?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, can you excuse me for a moment? Only because it's going to show that we don't have quorum because Councillor Farr is not sitting at his seat. So we have to change the system and redo the vote, please.
Redo that last vote?
Redo that last vote because it will show 8-0, which will show we don't have quorum.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on the consent items, sorry, Councillor Pearson, did you wish to speak? I don't know why it's on. Okay. A mover and a seconder to approve consent items.
I'm sorry, we're just going to redo the vote on the minutes because it was showing, sorry. Yes.
Beg your pardon. That's right, Esther, you tell him. Thank you, that carries. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You did mention that we were doing consent items, but are we not doing communications? Communications
Madam Clerk?
are 5, and consent items are 7.
Correct, and there are no communications in the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, you're right. Thank you.
And 7.3 as well should be in your roadmap, and that is the MPCA responses to committee questions.
On the consent.
Correct. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam, because of that, we're good? Okay, thank you. We're now into the delegations. I would like to call upon, sorry.
I'm so sorry. No, now we're actually doing the consent. The vote we redid was on the minutes because Councillor Farr had moved, so now we're going to vote on 7.1 to 7.3. My apologies.
Councillor Farr. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve consent items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3? Moved by Counselor Nan and seconded by Counselor Pauls. Counselor Farr and everyone else, please. Okay, that carries. Thank you. We are now moving to delegations. I would like to call upon Mr. Brian Ritkus of the Harbor West Neighbors. I understand you're here to speak to item 10.1. Good morning. It's my duty to inform you that you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Shouldn't take that long. Just give me 1 second here.
Of course.
Yeah, so my name is Brian Ritzkus. I live at 46 Simcoe Street West, and I live in the North End neighborhood. I'm also the president of Harbor West Neighbors. Dave Stevens is vice president, is here as well this morning. Our group was an appellant at the Pier 8 LPAP appeal. We participated in the settlement that is going to the tribunal on Friday. I'm also one of the 2 appellants of the official plan amendment for Piers 1 to 7. That appeal has also been settled. After signed the settlement document, the Harbor West Committee made serious changes without talking to us. The changes included leaving the police station with its barbed wire compound on the waterfront trail under the house on Bay Street, the houses on Bay Street, including directly under the house of Hank and Anna Nyhoff, who live at 477 Bay Street. Hank is here as well. The building, when you're looking from up top, it looks like a prison with all the barbed wire fences, etc. It's a little under, it's not quite what we envisioned for the waterfront. After asking to be a delegate, I learned also that later at the meeting that the West Harbor Subcommittee decided to defer the proposed changes to the next year. As a result, it seems our concerns about Pier 1 to 7 should be addressed next year, but it's going to stay on the books as it is. Our group still has concerns with the change proposed for Pier 8, but to save time, I've seen the presentation that's going to be made by Herman this morning, and I defer to that presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Ritkus. Are there any questions of the presenter today? Thank you for coming this morning. Councillor Collins has moved to receive, seconded by Councillor Marula. An electronic vote is not required, so that carries. Mr. Herman Turkstra? I understand you're speaking to 10.1, sir. Welcome.
I didn't hear what you just said, Madam Chair.
Are you speaking to 10.1 this morning, sir?
Yes, correct.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be back. I'm here as chairman of the Planning Committee of the North End Neighborhood Association, and in my personal capacity as an appellant of the Pier 8 proposal to talk about what's happened in the last 2 months with regard to Pier 8. My submissions are about Pier 8 only. For the councillors that we've not spoken to in the past, I just take a minute to point out that this is an identifiable, clearly identifiable neighborhood, 5,000 people, 1,000 children, 2 schools, 3 churches, a local recreation center, lots of small houses on small lots, narrow streets, officially recognized as a child and family-friendly neighborhood, a place where parents will want to live with their children, and it's already been approved for intensification. The existing projects that are approved will intensify this neighborhood by 50%. In other words, we're going to get another 2,500 or 3,000 people there on the basis of what's already approved. So it is a complete and stable urban core community, the kind of thing that cities just love because parents and workers are living right in the middle of the city. There are rules that you have approved for what happens in our neighborhood, and specifically in red, this character and the neighborhood's physical relationships to the waterfront are assets to be protected and enhanced. And so we come at all of these discussions with, is this development enhancing the neighborhood. We worry about it disappearing. Sorry. This was us in 2013 after the municipal board had approved the secondary plan and the traffic management plan. And this is how we see ourselves being viewed by this building. That is, our neighborhood consists largely of Pier 8 and the Jamesville housing project. And little by little, we seem to be less of a concern. For example, in the January 2014 report, which set the entire program for Pier 8 in motion, there was not one word about the impact on the neighborhood. Not a word. So we're back there on Friday to carry out and get the official board decision of the settlement that we have reached, that everybody in this room is familiar with. And then while we're at LPAT, talking about a whole neighborhood, the sense of what's going on is that we have virtually disappeared. There's a whole discussion about what's going to happen from a budget point of view, which turns into a discussion about what's going to happen from a planning point of view, and we're not asked to talk about that. So I'm here this morning to remind council of what it has decided. First of all, you approved a plan under the urban design program that called for a greenway through the middle. For those of us who were there, Madam Chair, the greenway was a major feature, and you'll see why in a minute. It's a major feature in the whole plan for Pier 8. You'll see how between the buildings. This is the plan that has a theory as to what it's there for, why it's to work, what it's supposed to do, and this is what Waterfront Shores translated that into looking at. The Waterfront Shores architect took us on a tour of similar properties and situations in Toronto to show us what he meant by this. You all know Bruce is a great architect. This is his vision of that street, and without anybody having any discussion about it, there's a staff report that says, let's cut a third of it off. There's no discussion with anybody. From my point of view, I just signed a settlement agreement with the City of Hamilton based on a plan of subdivision that is in front of LPAT, in which the greenway is shown clearly and marked on the plan of subdivision. While we're going to LPAT on a settlement on Friday, the committee the West Harbor Committee is determining that there's going to be a change in this plan. I don't know how to bargain, negotiate, or settle cases with the City of Hamilton. So this is what happened. Staff be directed to make the necessary modifications to the West Harbor Capital Program to redirect funding allocated to future Piers 5-7 public road with the intent to increase the overall program, and so on. The Greenway, the project can be deferred to 2021 and future years, and the scope of the project can be reduced by reducing the width of the corridor from 18 millimeters to 18 meters to 12 meters. This will translate to both a lower cost to construct and an increase in land area to sell for development. What is going on? You've already accepted a bid. You've already accepted the purchase price. You know what you're getting in there. What is happening? So it says, here's the relevant consultation. The Waterfront Development Office staff have consulted with staff from the Financial Planning and Policy Corporate Services to determine suitable revisions to the West Harbor Capital Program that will minimize impacts on the levy and development charges reserved. In other words, for a couple of dollars, $1.2 million, you're just going to sit in a room somewhere without talking to anybody and change the program. So the committee has said, well, we'll defer it to next year. We're here to ask you not to defer it to next year. We're here to ask you to turn it down. Get rid of that whole concept that the Greenway is going to be changed in this fashion. If it's left deferred, it's going to influence the staff. There will be talk about how you can live with it in the smaller side. The second thing is, can we be told about these things before they happen? Is there some way in which you can decide that maybe it's okay to let your neighborhood association know that, by the way, we're thinking about a major change in the plans that you approved with us a year ago? Can you just let us know? I mean, is that a silly request to say, we're involved in this as partners with you, we're working with you, we settle these cases. Is there any reason you can't tell us when you're going to change them, or at least listen to us? Thank you. I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Turkstra. Are there any questions? The report itself will be considered later on in the agenda. Are there
Yes.
any questions of Mr. Turkstra? Thank you, Mr. Turkstra. It's moved by Councillor Collins and seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Farr. To receive. Thank you.
Am I done? Okay. May I just say, Madam Chair, that one footnote? I'm here today speaking about this, knowing that I will never see any of this. This is not about me or my neighbors. This is about the future for Pier 8. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're on to discussion items. 10.1, West Harbour Development Subcommittee Report 19-003. Are there any discussions respecting item 10.1? I have a question of staff. Madam Councillor Partridge, would you mind taking the chair? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Thorne, specific to the issue that was raised, was the neighborhood consulted on the proposed change to the Greenway?
Through the chair, the proposed change was brought forward to the West Harbour Subcommittee, so that was a public meeting. I'm not aware if I wasn't at that meeting. I don't think that the North End neighborhood was in attendance, but I wasn't at the meeting, so I'd have to maybe ask.
Mr. Chris, how was the public engaged on these proposed changes?
Through you, Madam Chair, there wasn't any direct consultation with the neighborhood association with the public. This was driven by this report was driven by actually council direction to look at the capital budget and see if we could accommodate any changes in order to incorporate in the boardwalk project on Pier 6 and 7.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, during the consultation that you did have, which I understand to be extensive, the idea of the green belt, was it prominent during the discussions with the neighbors, and were they supportive of that concept and the definition as it's provided?
Through you, Deputy or Chair. I think it's a difficult question for me to ask. I mean, the Greenway itself came up through the urban design study. It was actually proposed by the consultants, not particularly the public specific at all. The main function of the Greenway concept was actually for stormwater management purposes. Setting Sail had laid out a specific width that really revolved around the width of a regular roadway, regular right-of-way for the area. And staff incorporated, as did the consultants, incorporated when we went to the Greenway concept for stormwater management, we incorporated the same right-of-way. I believe what the report before you basically says is that there are no specs designed for something like this Greenway. We don't have any of these greenways anywhere else in the city. It was proposed on this particular piece of property. And I think what the report basically says is that in doing so, in looking at it in retrospect, we could actually narrow that and actually save some capital funding without actually affecting both the public space elements of it as well as the functionality of it from a stormwater management. With that said, it's completely in council's discretion. It's a city expense, a city infrastructure expense on Pier 8.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I don't mean to be difficult, but how do we know it's not going to affect the public space aspect of it if you're reducing it by 6 meters?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just because of our analysis of the width and what you can do within the width and how much you actually need of it, need to do for stormwater management and how much that you could for other uses.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Chris, I guess. I can't find it in my notes. My understanding is that this Pier 8 is about 1,600 units. Is that the case, given?
Sorry, Madam Chair, could you repeat the question? I apologize.
One of the delegates put up on the screen, through you, Madam Chair, and I can't find it in my own notes, I apologize, but in relinquishing 6 meters on the green belt, or the greenway, beg your pardon, you're freeing up land for development. Is that the case? Through you?
Through you, Madam Chair, by reducing the width of the right-of-way, we're saving the infrastructure, some infrastructure money. What happens with that space is completely up to the city and council as to what you could do. Certainly part of it is you could increase, then you could attack the width on either side of the right-of-way onto the development blocks and therefore make the development blocks slightly larger. On the same token, the city could retain it and do whatever it wishes with it. There's nothing in the recommendation that speaks directly for the developer. I also want to be clear, there's no, this recommendation isn't coming at all from the development side of it. It's solely as it relates to capital expenditures for the area, for a project that's planned for some time down the road, and an ability to look and rationalize the costs and see if there's a way to kind of squeeze it from there. The reduction is purely a proposal by staff in order to accommodate the pressures on the capital budget. If council wishes not to reduce the size of it, staff would proceed exactly as was in the plan.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just trying to understand, though, Chris, there is a certain density or a certain number of units that have been established for Pier 8. So if we are relinquishing public space and potentially opening up for the development, are you suggesting that we're not changing the density, we're perhaps just changing the size of units? I'm just trying to understand the various implications that could be, that could open up.
Yeah, so through the chair, so this wouldn't affect the densities, the number of units, those sort of things are set in policy, so this wouldn't affect that. The only area where it may affect is how that landscape, potentially how that landscape space is allocated. So it's possible that some of the landscape space could be allocated on the private realm side, on the public realm side, but this does not affect the actual yield or density on the property because those are established in policy as well. So as Chris said, this is really about looking at a way of engineering the infrastructure in such a way that there's potential for capital cost savings.
Just one final question. In that reconfiguration, is there a possibility that now freed up space could be allocated towards a different use like parking? Through you, Madam Chair.
So through the chair, I don't believe so because the circulation in terms of the function of the greenway is unchanged. The function of the greenway is for public access for stormwater management, as Chris said. So I wouldn't anticipate that this is going to completely change the functionality of the site. So so again, it really is about trying to find ways to provide for the infrastructure in a more cost-effective way.
Thank you. I'll take back the chair. Thank you, Madam. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to staff, if I'm understanding what I just heard previously, the sole purpose of reducing the size of that green space, I'm going to call it green space, was strictly cost savings for infrastructure. Is that accurate?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, correct.
And what other options did we look at?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I mean, there's several options laid out in the report, all of which are kind of approved. We looked at
I know what's in
deferring-
the report, Chris, thank you very much, but for those who have not seen the report, can you say 5, can you say 10, can you say 2 other options?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, there's plenty of options. The report itself has specific projects that are contained within it. In fact, this is only 1.6 million of approximately $15 million worth of projects that we looked at, and most of which were a deferral of projects to a later point in time, not necessarily a deletion of the projects.
Okay, so, but this one in particular, what I'm hearing is not a deferral. Correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair. What I'm hearing is that it is being reduced.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes, that's the recommendation in here, is to look at re-engineering in order to save capital expenditure, of which that we do not believe that it would actually affect the functionality of the infrastructure being put in place.
And I appreciate your answer, Chris. What concerns me here is that, you know, the whole West Harbor development is all about people and space and outdoor amenities. And when I hear storm management, storm water, I think of, you know, the retention ponds that we have in the developments, for instance, up in Waterdown. That's not what this is. This is a green space where the pedestrian walkways and people could be accessing it and really, really contributing and enhancing the, you know, the whole look and feel of what is down there. So I'm a little unsettled that we are taking away from that space and that there wasn't something else that could have been looked at, potentially to save more money or the same amount of money. Any comments on that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. The only comment I would make is kind of large scale, and certainly we could look at many different projects. We could add other projects on the list. The ones that were there would seem to be us looking at the program in a rational way and trying to see what elements we could do in order to look at how we spend and allocate the capital dollars specifically and in the most effective manner. I do think, though, that something that is being lost on this is that key element of this is in the report and what you're being asked to approve today. You're actually you're approving probably the most fundamental public space project in the entire plan. And that is a 950-meter cantilevered boardwalk stretching between Leander and Pier 7 on land that the public has never had access to unless you owned a boat. And so I think that there is an element to this. It's not, none of the criticism is kind of taken specifically. It's all valid. They're all different projects. We collectively, council through the subcommittee and staff, looked at the projects and thought the cantilevered boardwalk on Pier 6 and 7 is such a transformational project that we should get on with that today. And in order to do that, we looked to smooth out the capital projects as we went through. And this just seemed like a way that we could, in retrospect, looked at the plans and kind of thought we could kind of squeeze it. So that's really the rationale. Again, as I said earlier on to the Deputy Mayor, if council wishes us not to look at this option, then that's certainly on the table as well.
So and thank you, Chris, because I'm really pleased that you introduced the boardwalk into your answer. That's what I was looking for. The other question I have, Madam Chair, is item C under the recommendations. It talks about the construction of the permanent Macassa Bay Police Marine Unit facility, that it be deferred to 2022. I thought that was an urgent issue, that they needed to have that location down there sooner as opposed to later. Why are we deferring it to 2022?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, great question. The reality is that the temporary facility that the city built over in the former McDonald Marine Lands on Macassa Bay is actually functioning quite well and much greater than what the police probably anticipated at the time. In fact, all indication from both those who work at the police service down in the Marine unit and those at headquarters are ecstatic over the actual facility itself. And therefore, we believe that that project could be deferred because the facility that they're in today, although temporary in nature, meaning that it's mobile. It certainly far exceeds their expectations today and can continue on for many years from then.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Chris, I believe. What's the total city investment in this project? What are we in for in total?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just for clarification, meaning the entire West Harbor development plan?
Yes.
To date, Finance could probably have the better answer, but to date,
Rough
I'm going
number.
by memory here, round numbers, about 102 million in today's dollars up to 2019.
So the potential cost saving from reducing the scope of the Greenway in particular and leaving the West Harbor Subcommittee, that was the one issue that kind of stuck out as, is that really necessary? It's less than 2% of the total investment. Through you, Madam Chair, what I think I heard General Manager Thorne say is that it would be possible to maintain a minimum 18-meter wide greenway with 12 meters of city property and 6 meters on private property. Did I hear that correctly?
Through the chair, that is an option. So we can look at whether or not the setbacks in terms of where the actual development parcel goes to the property line. There would be some sort of setback from the property line that would incorporate some sort of landscaping. So that is one option with how you can maintain green space with the narrowed greenway. So yes, I did put that forward. That may be something that emerges once we get into the detailed planning on the actual development site.
So I think that would be a reasonable compromise, perhaps, that we could still maintain the initial minimum width of that greenway, maintain the use as it was intended, as it was presented to the public, but just make sure that we maintain the setbacks so that the full 18 meters is achieved. I can put that in a motion if that would be the will of council, and I can do that at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Danko. Councillor Collins.
Yeah, thanks. And so just to be clear, this was about the city, the committee actually finding savings. We were $15 million over budget, and so certainly not an easy task to go out and find components of the plan that we could eliminate or modify to find those savings. And certainly, I think a number of those that we were taken out of the plan were those that were added by consultants who modified the city's plan at a later date after we'd gone through the public consultation. So case in point would be a fountain that was added in Pier 8. That was never part of the recreational master plan process. It wasn't part of public consultation. And if memory serves me right, and I think Chris reiterated earlier, the Greenway was added at a later date as well. So components of the plan, and obviously tough decisions, components of the plan were taken out in order to get us down to a point where we achieved the $15 million in savings. And I think it's important to note as well that the operational costs were also bumped in order to help council mitigate the tax increases that we're facing for this year. So I think it was an easy process for us in terms of finding that list over a period of a couple of weeks. But certainly difficult decisions had to be made in terms of finding the right ones where we weren't jeopardizing the public realm components. And so the vast majority, I'd say 95% of the components and items that were part of the public consultation process, which lasted we went through that process over the course of 2 or 3 years. The vast majority of those components remain in the plan. And those that are in the public realm through Piers 6 and 7, I think, which are the centerpiece of everything we're doing down there, still remain today. And so as Councillor Partridge heard in answers to her question, the waterfront trail component, as well as all of the public lands around it, have been maintained. And so I think the committee's done a great job in terms of finding savings, but still providing a plan that provides a lot of recreational amenities for the general public. So I think we started from the premise that this council is not interested in expanding that envelope. It would have been very easy just to say, we're going to do everything, and we're going to expand the budget by $15 million. And so I'm not certain, how we would then come to this council and suggest that we take items out of the capital budget after this neighborhood, and I'm not certain why it wasn't referenced here today. This neighborhood has received more investment, public investment, from this council and previous councils than any other neighborhood in this city. And I think it's important to recognize that we're making those improvements because A, it's everyone's waterfront. It's not just the waterfront for those people who live in the vicinity. Every single person in this municipality and visitors to it should have the opportunity to enjoy our waterfront. And these plans go a long way to increase public access. And so I get the fact that we'll never get unanimity with some of the investments that we make. It wasn't too long ago that we had waterfront tours with people who had megaphones saying that we're gonna essentially close down the recreational boating clubs there, that the Leander was going to close because of the investments we were making, all kinds of scare tactics. And to be clear, I heard those same scare tactics on the beach strip when I worked with my residents to implement the waterfront trail. I heard that people were going to use the trail as a getaway. It was going to decrease property values. And so change is very difficult. There's no doubt about that. And especially when you're introducing more people to a place. There's always a reticence and a reluctance in as it relates to inviting new people to an area where historically we haven't seen that many people before. I get that part of it. That's human nature. However, I think we've been proven over the years with the investments we've made both in the East and the West Harbor that these have been sound investments. They've increased property values. They have made these areas more desirable as it relates to a nicer place to live. And by extension, they have become people places. And they've been celebrated in the local media. They've been celebrated in neighborhoods across the city. And I think the council should be very proud of the investments we've made. So I'm very comfortable with what's in front of us here today. I think the plan, the revised plan that we have moving forward will continue to improve the city's image and will continue to increase property values and will continue to provide recreational access for those people who wish to enjoy our waterfront for years to come. So those are my comments, Madam Chair.
Councillor Farr.
Can I get staff to check? Thank you for the previous comments and the questions. And I know from one fellow Waterfront Trust board member, and of course we all know Waterfront Trust is charged with the project management as they have in the past for this particular, hopefully after today and ratified at council, no longer well over budget project as it relates to Piers 6 and 7 and this public promenade. But I'll ask staff to hopefully come up with the answer in just a moment, and I'll say my words prior to that. But pretty sure as it relates to this east-west corridor, this greenway, originally slated at 18 meters. Was it 18 or 16? 18 meters. There was initially a thought that there was a requirement for stormwater management, and that is no longer the case. So I want to confirm whether or not that's correct. And obviously, the stormwater management piece might, and I could be wrong. I just want to make sure, and that might account for some of the meters that we're talking about. And just so folks who are not on the West Harbor Subcommittee, one of the arguments for this particular item of 8 items where we're trying to find savings in the millions to maintain our pace and get things moving. This one of 8 items, the reduction that's part of it accounts for $1.6 million of the tally as referenced before, where we found 1.6. And if we're going to go back to 18, I'm interested to hear where the 1.6 might come from, especially if it's coming from a waterfront subcommittee committee member here today and not at the committee. And as chair, I'm interested to find out what thoughts since committee, if that motion comes to bear, this committee member and that committee member has on getting that 1.6, where it's going to come from, so we can get going on this important public promenade project. But to visualize, just kind of look at the width of this room. That's what we're going to still have as a greenway. Parking was never even, it's not even a topic for consideration. It's still a greenway, and it's about as wide or a little wider than this room, roughly, give or take, just to give you an idea of what folks are getting. Visualize this as well, I'm referencing we're doing this so we can get on with the project 6 and 7 that we've been talking about and engaging on, fully engaging public on for years. The environmental assessments are done. We've worked with BARC, we've worked with neighbors, we've had engagement sessions out the yin-yang, probably more than any other project I can think of. So that's happened for years. We're ready to get going on it, and this is one green corridor in addition to others that are part of this project. The project itself that we can get going on is mostly pedestrianized. It's essentially 900 square meters of new public pedestrianized greenway. The perimeter of Pier 8, which is celebrated, it's a celebrated development. There are people, many, hundreds and hundreds, in the neighborhood I constantly engage on in the North End that are very much looking forward to it, that are always asking me, when are we going to get going? When are we going to get going? Trust me, through the last election, that was the #1 question in that neighborhood. When are you going to get going on that development? Well, we had appellancies going on. But that perimeter is 30 meters wide of greenway. Significant investments. You'll remember the public international contest to have that park built. So that includes an east-west corridor along the water's edge. There's still a greenway here at 12 meters if we pass what's here today. There's a plethora of expansion in public promenade that's part of this program. And one that's used to be a little wider than this room that is now about as wide as this room, from that window to that wall, thereabouts, just to give you a visual. So I want to put that in perspective. We're ready to go. We're ready to tender. And when I say we, I mean the board members of the Waterfront Trust and the project management. And today we address what has been a very unfortunate, as noted by the previous speaker, budget issue. It's not the first on major projects. And it's not the first on this project. It's $150 million or so West Harbor waterfront project that year over year I'm very, very grateful for, and as was alluded to, council's support, term over term council support to make this significant investment, because we know it's an investment that most people are going to very much be proud of, and that ultimately the taxpayers are going to be very, very satisfied with, and we're ready to get moving on it. So I just want to say, it's difficult. There's a very smart man who's a planning lawyer who likes to come and talk to us here, and I would never suggest that appellancy at an LPAT or an OMB is a problem. I'm actually very grateful that our residents, our leaders in this community, those who engage in whatever ways they do, whether it's a small neighborhood association on the corner of a neighborhood, or a neighborhood association that in their mandate claims to represent an entire neighborhood, or a neighborhood that calls themselves PERNA, they're progressive residents of the North End, there's 3 in the North End, to have that avenue when they're not happy with decisions that are made around this table to take it to a higher court. There is a master at appellancy in this room that is presented to us today. Years and years of appellancy to decisions that we've made that cost us, and just legal inside and outside, a lot of time, a lot of money, but I would never deny that right, and I will always appreciate that opportunity that residents and smart legal people from Turkstra Mazza or Harbor West neighbors or wherever they may be representing to have that opportunity. What I have said to that appellant and any other, whether it's Sarkoa, whether it's Brad Lamb in this ward, as soon as you're an appellant and I'm the counselor in the ward, I'm arm's length. I'm not engaging. I'm not in conversations with you, because I'm not going to land in some court trying to defend something that may have said in passing or at some community meeting. I've made that known. Years and years ago, and I continue to make it known. I don't know about any of you, but if you're engaging with an appellant to the city of Hamilton on the sly or at some community meeting, I don't know if that's good form. I personally figured it out in my first year being elected. So I continue to operate with that mantra. I don't engage with appellants. And unfortunately, there's a lot of appellancy going on, years and years of it, on different issues. And so it's difficult. You don't think I want to regularly attend a North End community meeting? I'd love to. Talking about this issue, can't do it. There's a lot of stuff revolving around this issue, directly or indirectly connected. So I'm sorry for that. I'm glad I had an opportunity to share that, or at least remind the one delegate on that. And finally, through you, do we have an answer? Was there a need for stormwater management along this hopefully formerly 18-meter greenway, now 12-meter wide greenway, so we can at least address in one of 8 capacities the budget overrun in the millions?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, as has been indicated earlier on, the right-of-way itself was always in the general plan. During the urban design study, the consultants came up with the idea of greening the area, pedestrianizing it, as well as using for stormwater management. Today, the plan would be to utilize the greenway for stormwater management as it relates to rooftop drainage, not necessarily drainage and stormwater for all the surface, as would be the case in normal kind of stormwater management, but it'd be used for rooftop. And so that the idea would be that there would be cleaner water that would then be discharged into the harbor.
Thank you. Love to get it back to 18 meters if someone has an idea to do that without impacting the levee. It was hours and hours of work with a whole lot of staff to find 8 areas in which to maintain the momentum and the plan, especially as it relates to finding the dough to get 6 and 7 going, as is an expectation of not just the folks in my ward, and I can tell you a large majority have this expectation, but the folks across this city who have heard us budget over budget year over year and shared with us, I think, for the most part, the positivity behind the investment that we're making. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. I think that there is a motion that will be presented by Councillor Danko. Councillor Danko?
Thank you, and I do appreciate the work that staff has done on this to, I think the whole process was to smooth out the impact on the levee, and they've come up with some very creative solutions for that. So just before I put this on the floor, through you, Madam Chair, to General Manager Thorne, if we were to maintain the 12 meters and simply maintain the additional 6 meters on private property through lot line setbacks, that will still maintain the $1.6 million in savings that's identified here. Is that correct?
Mr. Thorne?
Through the chair, yes, I believe so. I would just want to caution that we can't change the planning instruments through motion. So there are certain planning instruments that are approved pending the appeals, but have been approved by council in terms of the property lines, the draft plan, those sorts of things. So modifications to setbacks already established in the zoning, modifications to the draft plan already approved can't be done through motion. My understanding of the original question from the councillor was something along the lines of maintaining sort of a greenway concept, whether that is accommodated on the public side, the private side, how that space is allocated in terms of how much is allocated to permeability for stormwater retention. Those are the sorts of things we typically address through site plan. So I just want to caution that by motion, we can't be changing the planning instruments. We can't be changing the setbacks, the property lines, the draft plan, blocking structure, those sorts of things.
I'll put this on the floor, and then you can tell me if it's out of order. So the motion is that staff retain a minimum 18-meter wide greenway with 12 meters city property and a minimum of 6 meters private property. And I'm going to add in a proviso here, unless otherwise negotiated through good urban design principles. So that would still give some flexibility in the site plan process. Does that work for you?
So through the chair, it's the definition of where the lot lines are going to be by indicating that there will be a certain number of meters on the public side and a certain number of meters on the private side. It is starting to get into determining what would normally be draft plan conditions of where those lot lines lie. So I would suggest that if the interest is in making sure that there continues to be 18 meters of a greenway, notwithstanding how those planning instruments may be devised, notwithstanding how the infrastructure and stormwater function may be designed, that is something that we can seek to maintain through the site plan process. But I'd be concerned if the motion is actually directing either directly or indirectly where property lines may lie.
I'm just trying to maintain what is in the report with the 12 meters of city property, not changing that, but giving you some direction that we're still expecting that minimum 18 meters. So if that can't be done through a motion, but you can take that as what council intends without a motion, we can do that. But I don't want to put something on the floor that'll restrain you, that's, you know, not within, you know, proper governance. So can that be done without a motion, or would you prefer to keep it as this?
I think if the direction is to maintain 18 meters of greenway, green space, that would, like, I'd want to see that as a motion, because that does then constrain the options that we would be dealing with through site plan. So if the direction is that through site plan you want to make sure that there's 18 meters of greenway maintained, without speaking to whether that's on the private side or public side or what form it's going to take, that is direction we can take through motion. Like I said, anything that sort of starts to determine where property lines would be is where I would have concerns.
I'm hearing that this is it's going to cause problems if I do that, and I don't want to change the cost savings that have been identified by staff. So I'm going to drop this and just accept the report as is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any further discussion on this item? May I have a mover and a seconder for item 10.1, please? Moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Marula. Electronic vote, please. Thank you, that carries. We're here to discuss now item 10.2, which is Grids 2 and the Municipal Comprehensive Review, Consultation Update, and Employment Land Review. I understand, Councillor Collins, you would like to introduce a motion? I don't believe there is a presentation this morning. Am I correct on that?
Madam Chair, it is a discussion item. It is not intended to be a presentation. It's listed under discussion.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you. So you have the amendment in front of you, and it reads that the report PED 17010F respecting Grids 2 in the Municipal Comprehensive Review, Consultation Update, Employment Land Review be amended by adding new subsections C and D to read as follows. C, that staff be directed to consider the removal of lands located at 395 Centennial Parkway North, 185 Bancroft Street, and 25 Arrowsmith Road, site of the future GO station and associated parking, from the light industrial designation within the Centennial Neighborhood Secondary Plan, and D, that the lands located at 395 Centennial Parkway North, 185 Bancroft Street, and 25 Arrowsmith Road, site of the future GO station and associated parking, be added to a mixed-use designation or other appropriate designation as part of the Employment Land Review being completed as part of the Municipal Comprehensive Review. And so, Madam Chairman and members of the committee, this is essentially directing staff to look at the designation, that the planning designation that currently sits on the Confederation GO station site. And of course, we recently received information from the province that they were scaling back on their plans to construct a station at that location, certainly taking us back, setting us back several years. Of course, this piece of property was announced by the previous government that they were making a very large investment in not just a bus station, but a GO station as well. And unfortunately, the Premier and his cabinet have reduced the budget on that site. And so I thought I heard as part of their communication that they were looking at turning to the private sector, which I fully endorse, and making better use of lands as it relates to lands at or adjacent to GO station properties. I think if you look through to Burlington and look at the development around their stations, I think they've done a tremendous job in terms of introducing residential and commercial uses. And so this is a light industrial area. And essentially, this motion directs staff to investigate changing the designations on that site to permit and allow private investment in other forms above and beyond the light industrial designation. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Jackson, and I look forward to the information that comes back as part of the review.
Councillor Partridge. Thank you.
Yes, to the motion, yes, and thank you. And I'd just like to commend Councillor Collins because, you know, certainly the land that is around Aldershot was also just like an industrial wasteland, and has now, you know, there are buildings coming up and there's amenities going in there and there's green space and the GO station is right there and there's going to be tunnels right to the buildings. So I think it is something we absolutely need to do, and I wholly support it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Thorne.
Yes, through the chair, just one suggested modification to the motion in Part D to say that it be considered, that it be considered for addition to a mixed-use designation as opposed to that it be added to a mixed-use designation, just because through motion you can't actually make the change. So if the direction be modified to consider it, then we would put that out as part of the consultation process, and then we'd report back and council could make a decision at the appropriate time.
Councillor Collins is nodding his head, so thank you very much. We'll take that as a slight friendly. May I have any further discussion on the amendment? No? Okay. Can we vote on the amendment, please, as presented to you on your pink paper? That carries. Thank you. Now may I have a mover and a seconder for item 10.2 as amended? Councillor Pearson, you have a...
Thank you. I'll move it. I have no problem with that. But I also want to just thank Heather Travis for meeting with me and some of the issues in Ward 10. Appreciate, because I know I have an applicant or a property owner's agent here today, working with them and understanding this process is going through. It's a public process. It'll be quite involved, but I appreciate the direction on a number of the items that are affected in Ward 10. So I just wanted to say that, and I will move the report at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and I want to thank Manager Hickey Evans and Heather Travis, Planner Heather Travis as well, for having had some consultation with me on Appendix A of this report, 10.2, page 304, the Ward 6 locations all along Upper Ottawa Street, which is from Stone Church to Rymal Road. I'm very pleased to see that they're recommending it all be district commercial. That section of Upper Ottawa, although technically starting the Red Hill Prestige Commercial Business Park, begins at Upper Ottawa, east of Upper Ottawa, all the way over to Upper Red Hill Valley Parkway. But that stretch of Upper Ottawa on the east side, Madam Deputy Mayor, from Stone Church to Rymal, quite frankly, is across from a large Templemead residential community where you have a school, you have a park. And so I'm very pleased to see that staff are recommending that it be district commercial, retail, offices, doctors' offices, things like that instead. So I'm supportive of that. However, similar to Councillor Collins, but I'm not moving an amendment today, but I want to put staff on notice. Both Heather's aware, Manager Joanne Hickey Evans is aware. I want the clerk and all my colleagues to be aware. 1725 Stone Church Road East. So it's about a 20-acre site, Madam Deputy Mayor. If you came along the link eastward and you just started to go up the Dartnell Road, not the Dartnell Road, my apologies. If you went up the Red Hill Valley Parkway towards the intersection at Stone Church, Paramount, and where the Upper Red Hill Valley Parkway takes over, if you went up southward there, coming off the link, you would see about 20 acres of vacant virgin land that a current developer owns. Right now it's designated for light industrial. It was once dubbed the earlobe lands 10, 11 years ago when there were a multitude of sites being considered for the future stadium. And so my concern is that staff want to keep it as light industrial manufacturing for employment lands. The developer, who I've met with as well, has submitted an initial preliminary application wanting to, similar to Councillor Collins's locations, provide a greater latitude and flexibility of mixed use commercial, possibly some residential as well. That is probably one of the last gateway sites into the Red Hill Valley Business Park, coming off the link, coming up where the Red Hill Valley Parkway meets the link, and the exit ramps coming up there towards where you have the Home Depot on the one side, the Power Center, and on the other side, you have the McDonald's Esso, and in front of that McDonald's Esso, you have 20 acres of vacant virgin land. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, I'm not here to make any changes today, but Joanne and Heather are aware, as we're moving forward, and we're only receiving their employment land review report today, and they're to do lots of public consultation. My understanding is they're hoping to come back in February-ish of next year. I'm satisfied, having met with the developer as well, a large landowner in our city, and something great they want to do to just absolutely maximize the gateway component of that last 20 acres that's so visual from the link and the Red Hill Valley Parkway. I'm going to be working with staff to see if before February, some alterations to their preliminary recommendations could be forthcoming. If not, I may be in the position, similar to Councillor Collins, where I may have to ask for political support of converting to commercial and or mixed-use residential. So I just wanted to put everybody on notice, so nobody 3 months from now could say, Tom, it would have been nice if you told us back when the first report came forward, 1725 Stone Church Road East. Otherwise, I'm supportive of what's here today. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So through you to Heather. Heather, the list of dates for the community meetings coming up very quickly is starting next week. And I see that the closest one to Flamborough would be at the Dundas Town Hall. And there isn't anything planned for Flamborough. So how are you going to promote that one in Dundas to the folks up in Flamborough?
Through the chair, we have been trying to get the word out through direct emails to people on our mailing list who have already expressed interest in the project, certainly the website, as well as through newspaper notice. I believe also it was included in your community email that you send out with dates of upcoming events, which is very helpful in terms of being able to help us get the word out to Flamborough residents. And I just want to add too that the intent is we will obviously be doing further rounds of consultation on Grids 2 and MCR, and we will be touching points or all points of the city through future consultation rounds. So if Waterdown wasn't included this time, then certainly we will be looking to have a session there in the future.
And when I look at the map, there's not a huge amount of change proposed through Grids to Ward 15. In my area, most of it is just to open space and to be designated or labeled as open space. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. There's some open space lands which we're proposing to remove from employment and identify them as open space. So you're correct. For the employment land review side, there's really very little impact on the Waterdown area.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, and just have the owners of those properties, you've been in contact with them or someone?
Through the chair, not yet, but that is part of the consultation process going forward.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, I think it's my last question. You've got on the list here chambers of commerce as stakeholder groups that you're going to reach out to. What chambers are you going to reach out to?
Through the chair, Hamilton, Flamborough, and Stony Creek have all been contacted, and they did participate in our first round of stakeholder workshop, and they've been invited to participate in the next round as well.
Okay, thank you, because perhaps there is opportunity to have I work very closely with the Flamborough Chambers, so perhaps there's an opportunity to have a meeting with their membership being invited and perhaps a presentation. Would that be doable?
Through the chair, certainly that would be doable.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through the Deputy Mayor, just a quick question to staff. Similarly to the last question, just clarity on the housing interest groups for the upcoming stakeholder events. Which groups are these?
Through the chair, it's Indwell is the group that has participated to date. We've put out other requests, but to date, Indwell is the group that participated in our first session and has expressed interest in the second session as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a mover, Councillor Pearson, Seconder, Councillor Danko, for item 10.2 as amended. Electronic vote, please. Just on 10.2. Thank you. That carries. 10.3, open for business subcommittee report 19-003. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Partridge. Electronic vote, please. Thank you. That carries. Item 12, notices of motion. Are there any notices this morning? I was just waiting for the screen to be cleared. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Marula, you have a notice of motion?
I do indeed, Madam Chair. I don't have the formal motion written, but I just want to provide it as a notice. The province, Madam Chair, is whereby the province is going to be removing the ban on pit bulls. It's imminent, and then speaking with both Andrea, members of the government, they're all on board. It seems like it's going to be a unanimous support for it. So, to get ahead of that pit bull legalization, in speaking with staff, and I'm supportive of the elimination, I think the ban on breed-specific, in a breed-specific manner is truly moronic. The focus needs to be put on the owners rather than targeting a specific breed. And in saying that, and speaking with Ken, I think it's important that we regulate it somehow. So the notice will be that I'm working with staff to incorporate through our licensing process a reduced rate on licensing if the trainer and the dog are professionally trained with breed-specific dogs. So in essence, if you're going to be an owner of not only a pit bull, but that of a Rottweiler, which I happen to have two of, and a German Shepherd or what have you, that there will be some sort of formal training, and if you have that formal training, you get a reduced licensing fee, which will mitigate some of the issues that we've had in the past. Because I believe that the ban, as I mentioned, is not in the best interest of us, of the province, of the city. But more importantly, it doesn't correct anything. In essence, we have a lot of illegal dogs out there, and pit bulls included, that we need to encourage owners of responsible ownership of pit bulls. And the way we do that is to ensure that before they buy the pit bull, that they know they have to be trained, because the dog's not the problem, the owners are. So at the appropriate time, I'll have the perfect wording for that. I just in the process of developing it now. Secondly, another notice that I'd like to provide is that the Hamilton Spectator's building is presently zoned, I believe, industrial or indoor commercial. It's not zoned for potential residential use. So through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Thorne, I'm interested in finding out if we know what the actual zoning is of the building.
Mr. Thorne, would you happen to know that off the top of your head?
Sure, I don't know it off the top of my head. Can certainly find it, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, so my other notice of motion will be that, just as a notice of motion, that,
Nothing in writing.
I'm sorry?
I have nothing in writing, so I have nothing to put in the minute. I can't accept it if it's not in writing.
It's fine. I don't expect it to be in writing. I'm just throwing this out as, we're at committee. This is committee work. I'm throwing out an idea.
It's a balloon.
It just came up now. Because we're talking about the zoning
The
issues.
excitement of the pit bull got him.
Literally just talked about it. So,
5 minutes.
so I thought, why don't we look at this? Because the Spectator Building has a vested interest for the city. It is a gateway on the west end and very visible from the highway. So if it's zoned industrial and or commercial, I'd prefer to have a residential condominium development there with perhaps mixed use, something along those lines. So I guess, it's not a notice, I'm just speaking. So on that point, I'm gonna follow up with Jason to see how I'm going to approach this in a notice of motion fashion. Thank you.
With a nice glass of Chianti. Okay, thank you. It's hard to follow that up. General information, may I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments to the outstanding business list, please? Moved by Councillor Danko and seconded by Councillor Pauls. Electronic vote. That carries, thank you. Are there any other items of general information or other business other than dogs this morning? Hearing none, great. Oh, there is, Councillor Nan.
Just a general interest that we will be having a community meeting today. This evening, 6:30 is when the meeting begins. 6 p.m. is when the doors open at the Cotton Factory for any residents who would like to hear the community update. We have the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, Parks, we have Public Health, we've got Planning, Buildings, as well as the demolition company, Delson AIM, joining us to give a fulsome update on what happened and what are the impacts, and most importantly, what are the next steps going forward. So that's today in relation to the demolition that took place at 319 Sherman. Thank you.
Excellent information. Thank you, Councillor Nan, for that. Private and confidential. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the closed session minutes of November 6th as presented? You move it? Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Ferguson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Partridge, were you here? Thank you. Folks, we're voting on the closed session minutes. I don't know why I'm saying closed door. Councillor Marilla? Thank you, that carries. Now may I have a mover and a seconder to move into closed session respecting, beg your pardon, I'm sorry, Councillor Ferguson, I'm sorry.
Just before you do the preamble of going in camera, and I'd like to add a 14.3 when we go in camera. So an important matter has come up this morning, and I'd like to add a new private and confidential item to today's agenda as item 14.3, respecting potential regulatory litigation pursuant to section 8.1, subsection E, F, and K of the city's procedural bylaw 18270, subsections 239.2, subsections E and F and K of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject matter pertains to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, a position plan or procedure criteria or instruction to be applied to negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. So I'd like to add that as item 14.3 in camera.
Thank you, I have that in my roadmap, so may I please have a move?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, the only part that you are missing in your roadmap is the addition of a subsection K that the councillor just read out. So when you move in, you'll be moving in for K, and as he said, K is with respect to a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. So you can read the other two out, yes.
Thank you. May I please have a mover and seconder to move into closed session respecting items 14.2 and 14.3 pursuant to section 8.1, subsections D, E, F of the city's procedural bylaw 18-270 and section 239, subsection 2, subsections D, E, F, and K of the Ontario Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as the subject pertains to labor relations or employee negotiations, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality, or do I have to read this because Councillor?
You do have to read that out loud for the other items, but you do not have to read out K because
Okay, thank you. Affecting the municipality or local board. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and I do need an electronic vote for that permission. Oh, a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Pearson and Councillor Partridge. Thank you, that motion carries. So we're going into closed session now. So I might ask if anyone who does not, the media and anyone, staff who does not need to be here for that purpose, if you could excuse yourself and I'll take all your belongings with you. Would greatly appreciate that. I don't know where they went. Thank you. We are now in open session. Item 4.2. May I have a mover and seconder to approve the following? A, that the direction provided to staff in closed session respecting item report HSC 19062 Public Works 19092, maintenance services at Macassa and Wentworth Lodges be approved, and B, that report HSC 19062 slash PW 19092, maintenance services at Macassa and Wentworth Lodges remain confidential until approved by council. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Pauls, and seconded by Councillor Vanderbeek. All those in favor or opposed? Okay, that passes. Item 14.3, potential regulatory litigation. That the direction provided to staff in closed session be approved and remain confidential. We need an e-vote for that as well. Beg your pardon. Moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Ferguson. Thank you very much.